We're in the town hall of Walsall in the West Midlands tonight, and of course this is Question Time. And good evening, and a big welcome to you, television, radio, everybody here in the studio, and to our panel, the Conservative Energy Secretary, Amber Rudd, Labour's Yvette Cooper, who lost out to Jeremy Corbyn in last year's leadership election, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Tim Farron, the deputy leader of UKIP, Paul Nuttall, and the broadcaster who left Channel 4 News to be free to campaign, as he put it, for radical left policies, Paul Mist. Thanks very much. Thank you all very much. Just a reminder before we take our first question, if you want to get involved in the debate, Facebook, Twitter and text 83981 will get you there, and push the red button if you want to see what others are saying. Daniel Robertson has our first question. Daniel.
Is it racist to want to leave the European Union? Is it
racist to want to leave the EU? This is, I think, in the light, is it not, of Pat Glass, Labour's Shadow Europe Minister, who was recorded saying of somebody who wanted Brexit and who'd said that Poles were scroungers, that he was a horrible racist. And she didn't want to go back to this place, wherever it was. That happened today. So is it racist to want to leave the EU? Paul Nuttall.
No, it's not at all, and I think this is really a window into the heart of the Labour Party that this was said. If you remember back at the general election in 2010, Gordon Brown said something very similar about Gillian Duffy when he called her a bigoted woman. And look, what we're saying, those of us who want to leave the European Union, is that we want to enter the globe once again, because at the moment we're tied into the slowest growing economic bloc on the planet. And it isn't racist to be concerned about immigration, because what we're talking about here is numbers, and the figures which were just released today in terms of employment are quite frightening. The fact that 5 out of 6 new jobs went to people who were not born here would seem to be putting British people at the back of the queue. And indeed, we know from the ONS report last week that 800,000 people came from the European Union last year, even though the government statistics tell us it was only 257,000. We are basically under a deluge of people coming to this country, and what we need to do is to control our own borders. And it's not racist to say that you want to control your own borders, but the only way we will do that is by leaving the European Union on June the 23rd.
And that figure you gave, 4 out of 5 new jobs...
5 out of 6.
5 out of 6, in fact, does include half of them are people who live here already and are British citizens, just happen to be born outside Britain. So why give the wrong figure?
Well, actually, there are 5.2 million foreign workers now in Britain, 1 in 6 of the workforce. 2.2 million of those people have come from within the European Union. And look, the problem with immigration isn't just economic, because we are finding that wages are being driven down in working class communities, and the Bank of England have admitted that is the case, but it's also the social problem as well. Of course, when we can control immigration and numbers come in, people can integrate sensibly. The problem that we have is that too many people are coming and people aren't integrating into their communities.
Yvette Cooper. Let's come back to your Shadow Europe Minister saying that this man was a horrible racist because he said Poles were scroungers, or a particular family was.
Pat has apologised, and of course it is not racist to want to leave the European Union. It's not racist to be worried about immigration. There are concerns, particularly about dodgy employers who exploit low-skilled migration to undercut wages and jobs, and I think something should be done about that. Where it is racist, which is some of the things we've seen, for example, in the Conservative campaign against Sadiq Khan for being Muslim, and I think you should always call out racism, and you can do so at the same time as having a very sensible debate about things like immigration. I think, though, the trouble with what Paul has said is that I think there's actually a bit of a con going on here, and it is playing on people's fears, and it is a con, because What Paul actually has said, if Britain pulls out of Europe, is that he would want it to be the Norway model. Well, Norway has free movement. Well, you have said that in the past, actually.
I've never said that in my life.
You know, and what Norway means is you would have free movement. If you had the Swiss model, you would also have free movement. So I think there's a lot of false promise going on that somehow it's going to change migration policy substantially if we pull out. The thing that I do think, though, is a serious problem is you have had, in the last few days, we've had Nigel Farage talking about, you know, that there's somehow going to be violence on the streets, which is not dissimilar to what Enoch Powell said so many years ago. We have also had Boris Johnson attacking President Obama for his half-Kenyan heritage. And then we've had Michael Gove saying that somehow the country is going to be overrun by Albanian criminals. And I think that is actually playing on division. We know that the Leave campaign want to divide Britain from Europe.
Yvette,
but with
why
23
if you
days to
say
go,
that?
just a minute,
Wait,
just a minute,
not just a minute. No, not just a minute.
They should
Yvette,
not
no.
be trying
Yvette,
to divide communities from each other. That is wrong.
Right. Why did the Labour campaign then, in a leaked document, say that if the question of immigration came up, you should move away from it if it came up on the doorstep?
Well, I've never said that. I've always done the opposite.
Lucy Powell's document from the thing.
And I think actually I think you may have actually asked me that before the last election as well. But I think
you didn't answer it then, and you're not answering it now. It's perfectly reasonable to put the same question several times over.
I've always said you should always be prepared to talk about immigration. I don't think you should be switching the subject. I don't think it's wrong to talk about it, because whether it is about the problem about dodgy employers and exploitation, we should be taking much stronger action on that. That should mean us having stronger laws in Britain against exploitation, because some of it, frankly, is modern slavery, but it also means we should be working with other European countries to protect workers' rights, to defend workers' rights, rather than getting rid of them and dismissing them as red tape, as some in UKIP want to do, because that would make things worse.
Right. The woman there in spectacles. Yes, you.
I just want to go back to the point that David made about how it's not racist to talk about immigration. I do agree with that, but I think that we do need to acknowledge that there are right-wing peripheral parties such as Britain First and the BNP that are exploiting this immigration debate to the point where it's fueling horrific Islamophobia to their benefit by saying we've got so many immigrants coming here from these different countries. And it even echoes things like Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech, or Margaret Thatcher when she said we'd be aliens on our own street. And it's fueling a horrible thing in our country that's alienating Muslims and people that come here from other countries. And with a climate where we need to be united in the face of terror attacks, we are alienating people and making them feel like they are not welcome here. And we are exploiting this.
Thank you. And you sat there.
Being against immigration is not racist at all. The problem is that the immigrants, when they come, they don't go and live in Islington or Morningside in Edinburgh or St David's in Wales. They come to Walsall, and they come to Wolverhampton, and they come to Toxteth, where the schools are already overcrowded. You can't get a place in the doctors. We're just too full. Put the short signs up.
OK. Paul Mason.
I don't think it's racist to want to leave Europe, because I want to leave Europe, and I count myself as somebody who's fought against racism all my life. The reason I want to leave Europe is because it is impossible for the European Union to be a democracy. Simple as that. I don't care about how much it... I don't care how much it costs us. If it was doing its job, it would be worth paying. I think we're going to need more migrants. I also think we have a duty to take refugees. But let's put this at one side for a minute and think about this European choice we're having. I am, despite my belief that Europe just cannot work as it is, very unlikely to vote for Brexit on the day, because I do not want to hand power to a bunch of crazed right-wing conservatives. And I do not want to do that. I don't include you in this, by the way, you're a non-crazed right-wing conservative.
So this once chance in a lifetime, as we're told it is...
it won't be one chance in a lifetime.
Oh, so you're with UKIP, there'll be another chance if you lose.
Well, look, I'll tell you why. Because I think the European Union is disintegrating. Half the governments of East Europe are racist. The Eastern European governments are coming forward with people who want coalitions with the far right. I mean, how can this thing persist? But for us to go forward, I don't want to hand Michael Gove and Boris Johnson the chance to shape Britain's constitutional future with no election, no promise of an election, no further referendum on what deal we do. So I'm going to be looking very carefully, I've always said this, at what the position is as I go into that ballot box. But, no, to answer the original question...
So you might vote Remain?
Well, I might, but there are things that the Remain can do to convince me to do that. One would be to promise an election within 6 months of the referendum. Then we can all decide on the future relationship with Europe.
All right.
That's democracy.
OK. Amber Rudd.
Well, the short answer is no, I don't think it is racist. But I thought that the point that the lady in the middle there with the glasses brought up is really very interesting, because what she highlighted was the real difficulty of language in this particular debate. Because this is an incredibly important historic choice that everybody's going to be making on June the 23rd. And so all sorts of groups are piling in. And you're right, what's happening is there are racist groups piling in, and certainly they will vote to leave, and that does destabilise some of the language taking place. And I think that it's incredibly important, Paul, not necessarily to think about who or which party will be in charge, whichever way the vote goes. This is a historic chance for it to change or to stay in the EU for the UK. It's not about individuals. And if we move away from individuals, perhaps there'll be a few less insults flying around as well.
So would you promise to give us an election within 6 months of the vote? Would you?
Try to concentrate on the facts here. And this is another issue that came up, perhaps, that I would take issue with Paul on. When he chops out these facts that he thinks are facts, I don't think they're facts at all. 9 out of 10 people that are employed in the UK are British-born. The facts that he has are completely different to mine. And one of the things we must all be really careful for is some of the tabloid newspapers are putting out headlines that are simply not facts, and I would urge you to check them yourselves.
And
particularly on immigration, they are terribly inflammatory.
All right, what do you say to the man at the top there on the left, who said that people come to here, to Toxteth, they don't go to Islington and Morningside in Edinburgh?
Well,
in other words, and it's here that the schools are overcrowded, that the NHS is under pressure. What do you say to him?
To him, I say his concern is, I believe, that people are coming over here without having jobs to come to, without contributing. And that's one of the changes the Prime Minister has made with our relationship with the EU. So we can encourage people to come here, but only if they've got jobs to come here. They can't collect benefits, full benefits, for 4 years.
Is that an answer to your question, sir?
Well, it's not enough, is it?
Well, I mean, I would also point out to you, perhaps, that according to the latest statistics, immigrants contributed over £2.5 billion in tax for 2013-14. They are making a contribution.
Do you know why there are so many immigrants in Toxteth? Do you know why there are so many black people in Toxteth? Because that is where they were taken as slaves, when Liverpool was a slave port.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Yes.
OK, go on then, Paul Nuttall.
I'm sorry. What are you saying? What are you saying?
No,
you're from Liverpool. You're from Liverpool. What do you do? Do you object to all the black people who live in Liverpool?
No, I don't. But they weren't taken
Many of your supporters do. Many of UKIP supporters do.
They came in after 1945 when we had sensible immigration numbers. So, for example, between 45 and 97, around 30 to 50,000 people came every single year, which was a sensible number so people can assimilate. You can't do that when you've got 800,000 people coming every single year.
Are you saying that they shouldn't have come after the war?
Tim Farron's turn, I think.
Are you saying they shouldn't have come after the war?
Yes, no, they should. In sensible numbers.
Tim Farron, your turn.
Thank you. No worries. So, Daniel, I mean, your question is it racist to want to leave the European Union? Is it racist to talk about immigration? No, it isn't. I mean, I thoroughly disagree with Paul, but I like the guy, and I think he's, a sincere fella who believes what he believes. I believe him to be wrong, but I don't believe him to be a racist. What I think Pat Glass and her remarks do betray, though, is that there are too many folks on the Remain side of the argument who are running away from the issue of immigration and migration. I will not do that. I will absolutely categorically say that immigration to this country is by far much more a blessing than it is a curse. And if we Because if you look at some of the basic facts in our country now, so we've some figures out today saying, what, 2.1 million European Union citizens living and working, the emphasis on working and paying taxes in the United Kingdom, a figure close to 2 million British people, by the way, living and working, or indeed being retired elsewhere in the European Union. It's pretty much give and take. And we have all this sort of rhetoric about the damage migration has done to our country. You go to any A&E ward and see who makes you better. You see who's looking after our elderly parents in our care homes. You see who's looking after our children as teaching assistants and as teachers. Migration is helpful and has strengthens this country, and being in the European Union allows us to move to other countries, other people to come here. And the fact that there are so many people in this country working and from other areas just demonstrates the work ethic that so many of these folks have. We should be proud they choose Britain as their home.
OK.
I would like to address Paul and the gentleman there about Walsall and the immigration here and blaming social care, the issues of social care and immigration. It's a farce. Social care in this area is struggling because we are one of the biggest hit local government for cuts, local council, sorry, for cuts. We have lost, next year we've got to find £19 million. It's atrocious. Metropolitan councils have been hit a hell of a lot more than any of the others. It's Birmingham, being the largest authority in Europe, has had massive cuts. We cannot blame immigration. We've got to blame Conservative governments and the hand-down of cuts that are hitting the most vulnerable and just leaving people in crisis.
OK, hold on. Let's hear some more points, Tim. You, yes.
I'd like to completely disagree with the remarks made by the gentleman at the top left. Israel Zangwill described the US as a great melting pot where everybody is fused together to make something better. Shouldn't we encourage immigration from the EU to evade a demographic crisis and to advance our society?
And you, sir, with the glasses on up there on the top right.
Yeah, I'd just like to take issue with Paul Mason's comments about right-wing Conservatives. I mean, you've got to remember that millions of people voted Conservative in the last election. It was quite clear in the manifesto there was going to be a referendum. And, just to brand Conservatives generally, which I think it's about 10 million people, as crazed right-wingers, I mean, it's just appalling. And your comments about Toxteth, they're just so inflammatory. I mean, it's just appalling, the things you say.
Let me be clear about what I'm saying about the Conservatives. Let me be clear about what I'm saying about the Conservatives. We now know what a £35,000 a year in education at Eton buys you. It's the ability to stand up, slag off your opponent. If you're not winning the argument, start raising ludicrous points about the EU banning banana bunches more than 3. And if that doesn't work, you tussle your hair and you grin in a kind of inane manner. That, if I'd paid £35,000 a year and sent somebody to Eton and they came out doing that, I'd be disgusted. I think that the Tory right is...
Are we going to do less personal insults? Let's get with the arguments.
Well, I'm talking about Alexander Boris de Peffel Johnson, who has debased... he's debasing the rationality of this debate, and you should be very, very worried that this guy could be leading your party if he wins the referendum.
I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is these personal insults. Your focus here, and here you are, Paul, a brilliant man, and you're focusing on someone's education rather than the arguments for or against.
No, this is what John Major was saying. He was saying that the Tory right is adopting UKIP's argument, because this is what the Tories will become if this right-wing faction within it gets their way after the 23rd of June. It's this that frightens me above anything else, actually. Less than UKIP. UKIP is a known factor. We don't know what these guys will do if they take control of your party.
But how do you reconcile? It must be appalling for you, Paul. You long for Brexit and you don't dare vote for it.
We'll get another chance.
So you are with Farage, that he'll come up again?
No, I
so you'll get another chance to vote?
I think that one of the things Boris Johnson... But one of the things Boris Johnson actually said before this all started was that he would like to have a referendum on the result of the negotiation. Now, I think that would be something that I think those of us who are worried about an uncontrolled right-wing Brexit would like to see. Okay. Well, why are you laughing? You could deliver it. You're in the government. You're a Privy Councillor.
I'm just amazed
you could decree it right now.
You're just talking about individuals rather than the arguments. People want to know the facts. They want to know why...
There's a reason why you're straying away from Boris Johnson as an individual, because he might be your leader within 6 weeks' time.
All right. Yvette Cooper, do you want to... You might be leading a party, not within 6 weeks' time, but within 6 months' time.
I think, the worrying thing about actually, I understand why Amber is saying she doesn't want it to be personal, because actually it does feel like it's become personal within the Tory party. And too much of this debate, I think, to be honest, has been Tory politicians having a go at each other. I think that's probably why we've not heard enough about things like workers' rights in Europe.
Okay.
And I think it's why, too, we haven't heard enough about things like jobs in manufacturing in our industrial towns and all of those sorts of things that are at stake. And I probably, I think, some sympathy with Paul's point here. In the end, I don't really care if two old Etonians want to slug it out and have a duel over the future of the Tory party, but I do really care if they are putting people's jobs and people's livelihoods at risk over what is effectively a political game.
We've got another EU question which arises from this, which... Have you all had this booklet through? Yeah, we've all had it. And it comes from this, and the question's from Dominic and Louis. This is the Electoral Commission voting guide for the referendum. Dominic.
The Vote Remain campaign says that we receive £10 back for every pound we give to the EU. Vote Leave says that we pay £350 million per week and get half back. Who's right?
Right, so the Vote Remain, every pound we put in, we get £10 back. Vote Leave, put £350 in, and only get half of it back. So somebody's not telling the truth. Amber Rudd.
What Remain is doing is focusing on the benefits to the economy. So the fact that we have a single market, the fact that we get investment into the UK because we're part of a platform of access to the EU, which is what international investors say, it's working out the benefit, 10 to 1, of having that investment, having access to the single market. What the Leave are comparing it to is how much it costs, because they're simply looking at the bill for being a member of this club, then they're netting off the rebate, which Margaret Thatcher got, and any other money that's the equivalent of what we get back, and they're looking at the cost there, and they're saying, this is the cost of your membership, and they're not looking at these enormous benefits we get from the single market.
And you think it can be costed £10 for every pound you put in? Is that accurate?
Yes,
what do you think, Paul?
I have spent, 20 years covering economics, and I've learned not to take account of these kind of figures, I'm afraid. They're pulled out of abstract thinking, equations that don't add up. In the end, people have to take this decision on the basis of not this mirage of facts that we keep getting. The media is bombarding us with facts, and the more we get, the less we understand. You've just got to take a decision on the basis of, do you believe in the institutions? I would say it's on. Do you believe the institution is reformable? Can it deliver what you want as British people on the day, and then what the concrete consequence is on the day of the particular political leadership? To me, as I say, if it cost us double what it says in there, if it worked, it would be worth paying. My concern is that what you've got, one of the reasons the Tory right are so annoyed is because they're now getting the treatment that the Scots got during the independence referendum. They're getting the whole of the official state apparatus, the Bank of England, the Treasury, pumping out propaganda for Remain that has got no challengeability. They've got no ability, those who would like to see a different outcome, have got no ability to determine what the Treasury and the Bank of England are actually modelling.
OK, Tim Farron. Yeah. Everybody keeps asking for the facts. Yeah. Paul Mason says the facts pouring out, far too many, and they don't mean anything anyway.
Yeah, probably the only thing sort of more depressing about the referendum than the kind of blue-on-blue fist fight that there is between two old Etonian schoolmates is this complete constant trading of facts and figures and stats and so on. Doesn't mean they're not important. We've got to make a judgment as to what is the best interest of our country, best interest for us as individuals and as families. So there are some figures I think actually do stack up. The single market is worth £78 billion a year to the United Kingdom. We are net contributors to the European Union, it's true, to the tune of about £6.5 billion every year. You've got to work out whether that is a good deal. I think it's a good deal. But if I'm honest with you, what I am desperate for is something just a bit more uplifting in this debate. I think the reason why I will vote Remain on the 23rd of June is not just the economy, it's about a statement of what kind of country do I belong to? What kind of country is Britain? Are we an outward-looking country, or do we want to stand on the white cliffs of Dover, glowering in bad-tempered isolationism across the English Channel? I want Britain to be the kind of country that is engaged with the outside world. We have built a peace over the last 70 years. 25 years ago, 6 of the countries that are now in the European Union had nuclear weapons on their soil pointed at the West Midlands and the rest of the United Kingdom. Today, we work together. That's the kind of Europe I want my children to grow into. That is why I'm voting Remain.
All right. A reminder that Dominic's question was about who we believe on the money. You, sir?
I think we need to get back to the basics of the discussion and really get to understand what this is about. This is not about personalities. No. It's about 2 basic things. Can we manage the country ourselves, or will we continue to be told from a group of 27 other countries what we can do, what we can't do, how we should do it, but we've got to foot the bill? Surely we could take the money back ourselves and make better use of it.
So you don't believe the figures on that?
Nonsense.
What?
That's a lot of nonsense.
I think independence is a really important question here. Sorry, I'm looking here. It's a perfectly fair question, but I think it ignores the reality of the modern world. The European Union is not the only way in which we pool our sovereignty.
Okay.
We belong to the UN, to
there.
NATO, to the World Trade Organisation.
Right,
the most democratic of all those happens to be the European Union.
You, sir?
I think when we talk about the facts and figures in all these leaflets, it just shows... I'm personally depressed by politics. I mean, the EU referendum has shown just how broken the system is. Within parties, you've got infighting, one set of parties saying one lot of figures. We're being lied to, and there's not a genuine debate. I think the EU referendum has shown us the ugliest side of where British politics is. And it's all because there's no diversity. It's all the same people on either side of the chamber, to be honest.
Paul Nuttall. I will come to that. Paul Nuttall.
To answer the original question...
Can I answer his question first? Because you're good at answering questions. Go on.
Well, look, I mean, we're getting all sorts of facts and figures bandied around. You get one economist coming out saying one thing and then someone else saying the alternative. On the security issue, you have the ex-head of MI6 saying that we'd be more secure if we were out, others saying the opposite. And this is going to go on until the day, and it's going to be for you guys to then make that decision whether you want Britain to be stuck with inside the slowest economic
what do you say to his point, which is that he says that this is a disreputable campaign in which people are just attacking each other exactly the way you've just described, experts from either side saying opposite things. How do you restore confidence?
Well, to be honest with you, I want to get away from the personalities in this campaign, and I want to campaign on the real facts and the real figures. Now, I'll give you one. It is costing us £55 million every single day to be members of the European Union. Hold on, that's the gross figure. That's the gross figure. Hold on, OK? Then we get the rebate back, and then they give us a proportion of money back, and then they tell us how to spend our own money. So if you walk around Wolverhampton, or if you walk around Birmingham, you will see signs up saying, thank the European Union, this project was built with EU money. There is no such thing as EU money. It's your money, it's your taxation, and that money should stay here, in our country, spent on our schools, our hospitals, and on our transport network.
Yes.
What I'd like to know is what is the economic cost of a disenfranchised population, as expressed by the chap at the front there? We're losing interest in Europe. We've got no influence over it. That's going to have an economic cost down the line.
Paul, hang on. Yvette Cooper, would you like to answer him?
Yes, so say that question again.
Make the point again, could you?
What's the economic cost of having a disenfranchised population? The man expressed it very well at the front.
Yeah, I think that people are, feeling quite alienated from this whole debate and from everything that's being thrown around to and fro. So, look, if you go through the facts, I mean, Paul did go further than a lot of the Leave campaigners by conceding that actually the figure that they use, this £350 million they've got splattered all over the blunderbuss, is actually wrong.
No,
and the Statistics Authority has said it's misleading and dodgy to use it. Yeah, there is a contribution, and in return, what we get is access to the single market, and that makes it so much easier for our businesses to trade. And what you get on the other side is different estimates, and they are estimates by economists based on a whole load of evidence and analysis about what it would cost if we pull out of the single market and how much trade we will lose.
Is this right? Is this right, what it says here on the Remain side? For every pound we put in, we get almost £10 back.
Yeah, it's an estimate that's done by economists of
do you believe it? You say things that...
Yeah, it's one of the estimates.
You were Chief Secretary of the Treasury under a Labour government. Do you think they've got it right, or is it wrong?
I'll say it's right.
I think it's as
Do you think it's right?
I think it's as accurate as any other, but there is no way to point, because actually the honest
It's
truth
important,
is
Liz, 'cause
that
it's an official thing.
but nobody knows until you know what the trade deal is that is done.
So why put it in if nobody knows?
Well, because
Why
you
put
have
it
to
in?
make a judgment. You have to people want facts, and so we do our best to give people facts, but ultimately it's a judgment. People mind
You don't
about
say it's a
different
judgment
things.
here. You say get
But the
out more
bottom line,
than-
there is a bottom line here.
These are the facts that I believe to be true, but Paul believes different facts on this element. But I think in terms of the different
Can I answer?
There is one bottom line.
Though. Can I answer his question? Because I think your question was, what is the economic cost of a disenfranchised population? And I think we who are involved in public life should take that question seriously. I want to save the steel industry. When I drive past Port Talbot Steelworks, it is a brilliant bit of structural asset for this country. Okay? The European Union rules say we can't. That's basically what it says. And in addition, the European Commission itself has refused to fight for the whole European steel industry in the world market. If I could deselect the European Commission, believe me, I would. I've had a lot of interaction with that body, and if we could elect it and bring it under democratic control, it would be brilliant. But the very treaty on which the European Union is founded prevents us doing so. And it prevents a future Labour government from saving steel, it prevents a future Labour government from nationalising the railways, and this, to me, is the bread and butter of why we have to look critically at the European Union.
And you're still going to vote Remain?
Well, no, I didn't say I was going to vote Remain. I'm saying that the economic case for Brexit is strong, as is the political, but we don't need to be... The left Brexit people do not need to be dictated to by a Tory right cabal when and under what conditions we do so.
OK, I'm going back to Yvette Cooper, because she was halfway through what she was saying.
Before you interrupted me, I think that there's a lot of nonsense said about how the EU stops us doing a lot of things. Very often, the Tory government will use the EU as an excuse not to take action on steel when it could have done. They had the same issue around the coal industry in my constituency when the last pit closed, when the EU had said actually they would be able to help, and it was the Tory government who said no, we can't. So I think too often this is used as an excuse not to take action when we can do. But when it comes back to this basic point about what in the end are the facts, people will throw different numbers at you, but the bottom line in the end is that the cost of trade will be higher. If we are outside the single market, the cost of trade will be higher. They will give us a worse deal than the one we've got now. Why on earth would they let us still be in the club and give us a worse deal than the one we've got right now? And that means we would lose jobs and we would lose investment.
We deal with this subject every week. Everywhere we go, we deal with this subject. I don't want to stay on it. We've spent half the programme on it. You can have one sentence, Tim, and then I'm going to move on.
Steel.
Not too long a sentence either.
What we've seen in the steel industry is the consequences of a Chinese government's actions and an Indian business's decisions, proving that we are interconnected as a globe and we are far better off, together with our neighbours, standing up to those economic threats than on our own.
We could put I'm going to move on. So we've taken a half an hour, and I don't think it's fair. Every programme is entirely about the EU, because we have a long way still to go, and a lot of question times and debates, and goodness knows what, before we reach that date in June when Paul Mason has to decide how to cast his vote. We're going to be...
And millions of other people.
And millions of other people. We're going to be in Ipswich next week, I should just say, and we're in Cardiff the week after that. And if you look at the screen there, you'll see how to apply. You can make a note of the website and the telephone number. I'll give it again at the end. But let's move on for a question. Kevin Wilkes, please. Kevin Wilkes.
After the junior doctors debacle, isn't it time for the NHS to be ran independently rather than continually being a political football?
OK, so... Tim Farron.
I'll tell you what it is. It's certainly time for it to stop being used as a political football, to answer your question specifically. If Beveridge, the Liberal, who wrote the blueprint for the National Health Service in the 1940s, that in his day we'd been living to the ages that we are now, there is no question whatsoever that he would have included social care in with the National Health Service. And the fact that it is disjointed and disconnected from the National Health Service has to be addressed now, as does the relegation of mental health services behind physical health services. We have a National Health Service of which we should be massively proud, but let's not kid ourselves that we are spending enough on it. We are not. We spend less per capita or less percentage of GDP on our health service than most other European countries. It is time for a new beverage deal for all parties to put aside the politicking over the National Health Service and recognise we need that new deal to protect it for the future. It's no good putting the emphasis on junior doctors, as has happened over the last few months, to try and stretch out the resource so the government can meet a commitment it never could really meet. It's time for new resource. It's time for a new deal for the National Health Service, including mental health and social care.
But Tim, you're talking about finding more money for the NHS.
In the end, that is going to be absolutely necessary.
But the question is about whether it can be taken out of politics.
Which is why I think
Isn't that what you meant, Kevin? Explain what you're thinking.
I do agree with everything that Tim said about obviously bringing social care and mental health in. But for as long as I can remember, Labour have obviously thrown accusations at the Tories about looking to privatise and cut everywhere, and obviously it's then gone back the other way at obviously Labour being accused of bringing wasting money and spending middle management, and it's always something that both sides of the coin are always just fighting each other on, where what should really be happening is people who actually know how to run the NHS and how to run these things should actually be in place. They should be given, obviously, whatever money they need and allowed to run it.
Okay. And the woman there, yes. You in the second row from the back, yes.
Hello, can I just say I work in the NHS?
You can.
And when I joined, first thing I got told is every time a new political party joins, it will change and it will go round in circles and we'll waste a lot of money. And when the PCTs went down, all their emails addresses just changed and it was the same people. Credible waste of money. And can I just say Jeremy Hunt should resign for his treatment as the junior doctor. The smear is appalling. They are hard workers and they do not deserve what the Conservatives have done to them. Shame, he should resign.
All right. Amber Rudd. Jeremy Hunt should go.
Well, naturally, I don't agree with that, and I would really congratulate the combination of Jeremy Hunt and the junior doctors and the BMA in coming to an agreement today. Don't you welcome the fact that the dispute is now, we hope, over, as they've reached an agreement and it's now going to be decided on. So the fact is we made a manifesto commitment to deliver a 7-day NHS, and we've put in place now the arrangements to be able to do that. And an agreement has been reached, and I think it's a great relief.
Why didn't Jeremy make those concessions earlier? Why has he waited so many months to do it?
Independent of the NHS, there is a chief executive. There is a chief executive of the NHS, Simon Stevens, and he was put in place in order to take it out of being a political football, so that he could put together the plan, which he did under the last government, in order to say how much money was needed. He said how much money was needed, and that's why we've put up the extra 10 billion, so it can be done. And can I just say, Yvette, the real differences between a Conservative government and a Labour government is we've got a strong economy that is enabling us to put in that 10 billion. The finances that we inherited from you in 2010 was such a disaster, there would have been no chance to be able to deliver on the strong NHS that we are now able to finance because we've got a stronger economy.
Let's not just talk about the economy. Let's deal with the original question, which was, OK, you obviously need wealth to fund the NHS, whichever party you are, whoever's in power. The question wasn't that. It's why couldn't it be run independently? In other words, you give money to it independently.
Well, that's why we put in place the chief executive.
Well, look, what actually happened, and you were in government, your party did this, the NHS Act 2010. It made the NHS into an independent body, so the idea was the Secretary of State would have nothing to do with it. Jeremy Hunt spends every morning biting his fingernails over the next A&E closure. That's what really happens. He is micromanaging the NHS from his own department, because the act that you and the Tories put into place did not work. What it did was shovel large parts of the NHS into the hands of private companies, many of whom just happen to have directors and owners who are in the Tory party.
Oh.
That is what's happened. That is what's happened.
Well, sorry, which act are you talking about?
I hope the junior doctors throw that deal back in their face. I hope they do.
That's really not very helpful for patients, Paul. What about the patients here?
The patients support the junior doctors.
So the
have you met any? Have you met any? Go to Walsall. Go and meet them.
Okay. First of all, note that I rebelled on the NHS bill, and second,
congratulations.
Thank you. And secondly, I think the key point in all of this, of the junior doctors debate, it is a reminder that resource is the issue here. And if you constantly keep pushing that ball down the road, it's never going to get solved. So the answer to the question is it does need to be an all-party thing, because if we're going to take it that step forward, bring in social care, advance mental health, pay for what we need, it is going to cost us more. It will never happen if one party is scoring points off the other. It will only happen if there is a new Beveridge-style consensus.
But how do you achieve that? Yvette Cooper, do you think it's achievable?
Well, I hope so, because it is the thing that people believe in. It's probably the most treasured national institution, with the second one being the BBC, which has also seen quite a lot of attacks recently. I think they...
Who booed then?
And what were they doing?
Yes. I don't think they were booing the BBC. I think you're all right. I think that Amber didn't answer my question, which is why, in the end, Jeremy Hunt didn't make these concessions months ago. Why has this been dragged out month after month? Why have we had people have appointments cancelled? Why have we had huge threats on hospitals? And really undermining the morale of some of the most important assets of the National Health Service, which is the people who work in it. That's what he's put at risk, and that's what he's done with.
But would it be possible, just to go back to Kevin's question there, would it be possible to have some kind of institution, we've had this come up on Question Time before, some kind of institution which was agreed between all parties should run the national health? The Chancellor of the Exchequer obviously would give the money or take the money away, but the actual running of it, the detail, would not be in the hands of party politicians, not in the hands of Jeremy Hunt or of a Labour minister.
I think you do want as much decision-making as possible taken by the medical professionals, the experts, the people who are actually should be running the hospitals, running primary care and running care in the community as well. I think the only thing I would caution, though, is if what you simply do is say we're going to, pass all of the responsibility, but it's still going to be the government writing the cheque and not writing a big enough cheque and not actually doing the things that it needs to do, then you've got a problem. And the second thing is, I do still think they should be accountable to local communities. I think we'd be better having more accountability for the National Health Service and social care together in local communities, rather than it be simply something that a health secretary can weigh into whenever he just wants to make a political point and pick a fight.
OK, you, sir. And then I'll come to you, Paul.
I'm so glad we're having this discussion. I think absolutely right. It should be taken out of the hands of politicians. I'm on the board of one of the NHS trusts locally here. And every 5-6 years, you see this pattern of change when the political cycle changes. And what you actually need is for it to be taken out of the influence of political environments. The one thing that everyone needs to do is to level with the population in terms of what's really going on. There's a humongous demand in the NHS, and it's got nothing to do with immigrants. It's absolutely everything to do with the ageing demographics, the diseases that we're actually being able to cure now, which we couldn't before, and the demands that have been placed on resources that are available. So you have to level with the population. Do taxes go up? Does the service go down? What is it you actually are promising? Because at the moment, you're trying to make things add up when they won't.
Paul Nuttall.
I think we all realise that we are heading towards us all having to have a debate about the NHS and how it's funded, simply because we have an ageing population, we have a growing population, drugs are becoming more expensive, and it's a debate that we're going to have as grown-ups as we move on into the 21st century.
What's your answer?
Well, my answer is we're going to have to spend a lot more money in the future, and then that will have to go out to a general election, and a political party will have to put that to the electorate to see whether the electorate are willing to plough more money into the NHS.
So taxation is your route. I thought your route was to get people to pay. Well, individually.
Well, the UKIP manifesto at last year's general election said that we will plough an extra £3 billion a year into the NHS. But I will say this: the biggest threat, immediate threat to the NHS, comes from the TTIP agreement, the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, which the European Union is negotiating now with the United States. There's an article in it called the Investor-State Dispute Settlement, which will allow American corporations to sue the National Health Service if they do not get what they want. So, for example, at the moment, you've got Philip Morris suing the Australian government because the Australian government have harmed their profits by bringing in plain packaging. That could happen here in the NHS, and the only way we can ensure that we can protect the NHS is by voting to leave on June the 20th.
OK, hold on a second. Let's just clarify this. I thought, Amber Rudd, you clear up on this. This was in the Queen's speech, and I thought there was an amendment to exclude the NHS from this agreement.
That's correct.
So is he just
You must legislate to protect the NHS.
The government already takes the view that...
takes the view, legislates.
The first position is that we take the view that it is excluded, the NHS, from the TTIP. We have a different interpretation to you. And since then... You are right, Mr Chairman. We have agreed that the additional legislation will be in place to reassure everybody so that they can be absolutely clear that the NHS will not be included in the TTIP. While I have the floor, may I just say that I think you are absolutely right in your point, that there are expectations that we have to manage of people. We have to decide whether we're going to carry on with what we believe and hope can be a first-class service with additional problems, and if we're going to pay for them. That debate has to take place at some stage. But in terms of the independence of the NHS and who should work that out, part of that has been given to the new Chief Executive. He puts together the plan and then it goes to the Chancellor and says, this is what we need to deliver on it. So maybe Paul is right, that system needs beefing up. But the principles of doing exactly that, we have put in place.
I think the point on the...
He is.
He's tried to do that, but the funds he's asked for were actually taken down a little bit.
Indeed, they were. Indeed, that's absolutely correct. But the junior doctors issue, to go back to that point, in any organisation, leadership is so immensely important. And Jeremy Hunt, whether it's right or not, has a leadership position in all this. And how he has managed the junior doctor dispute, well, he's taken a leaf out of how Michael Gove managed teachers. If you've got a group of people who you want to move towards a certain end, the last thing you do is totally demoralise them. And yes, I'm on the side of the junior doctors, but what I'm even more concerned about is all those young people out there, bright young people, who might become medics and doctors in the future, who think, that's not for me now. He has turned off a whole generation of people who might otherwise have gone into our health service.
Right. Paul Mason, very briefly. Hold on. Just for people who are never quite sure what TTIP is, what exactly is the implication, you're an economist, of TTIP on the NHS? Why is this an issue? Just explain in layman's language, if you would.
Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership is a binding treaty that gives, that says, look, we, Britain, have to, and Europe, have to open up our markets to American companies, and that if they are unfairly discriminated against, i.e. you cannot own the NHS, they can sue us in a court. So we have to exempt the NHS. I would exempt a lot of other stuff, and I would simply say we should veto TTIP in Europe, and it's probably likely to happen. I wouldn't see this as a leaving or staying in issue for Europe, but, you know, we put the pressure on the Commission to veto it, and while I've got the floor, I will just do what you lot haven't done. There's a $28 billion pound tax gap in this country. We're not collecting at least 28. It could be 128. That money should be collected from the tax-dodging rich and used to pay for the NHS.
OK. All right, now, we have 10 minutes left. We've made your point. We'll go on. Somebody mentioned Michael Gove on the other side of the table here, so let's have a question. We just might touch on him. It's Konrad Szymotsky, please. Konrad Szymotsky, right. Yes.
Prison reform has included suggestions that some prisoners would only go to prison at weekends and given iPads. Are we being soft on crime?
These are the suggestions that have come out from Michael Gove for reforms, and you may well have seen the pictures of the chaos in Wandsworth Prison and others, of drugs being brought in by by drones. Did you see all this stuff? Probably arranged by the department so that the position should be understood. Anyway, and the suggestion is work at home during the week and weekends in prison. Are we being soft? Yvette Cooper.
It depends, obviously, what the crime is that's been committed. Clearly, if people have committed violent crimes, serious crimes, abuse, then there has to be a proper sentence and the public has to be protected, but also victims need to feel that actually justice is being done. But there are other crimes, actually, that where you could have very different sentencing, where you don't end up having to have overcrowded prisons. So I think it's sensible to look at that kind of reform. It's sensible to look at educational reform and rehabilitation. But the real problem I have with what they announced this week is that actually what they were really talking about was just 6 prisons out of 130 would get some flexibility to do some more stuff, but nothing seriously to tackle the major overcrowding problems, the awful, really shocking images that we saw on the news last night of some of the things going on in Wandsworth prisons. You've got an increase of about a third in violent attacks on staff, increase of about a quarter of attacks on prisoners, suicide rates up, really shocking what's happening, and it's a consequence of having cut the number of staff by a third. You've got prisoners who are being locked in their cells for 23 hours at a time because there are not enough staff to look after them and to supervise them. Unless that is sorted out, all of these reforms are just going to be a con.
Conrad Szymotsky, you asked this question. You were a police officer, I think. Do you think we're being soft on crime?
I think we are. I think if you do the crime, you should do the time. I think it's no good. I don't really think that sending prisoners to prison at weekends only and let them have the week off to work. I don't think it's going to work. I think they have enough cushy time in prison, it is. And the other suggestion is giving them iPads as well. I think, well, how much is an iPad? I think it's a no-goer.
Paul Nuttall.
Well, the cynic in me thought that this announcement by Michael Gove was a bit of a publicity stunt, but I am prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt, simply because if you look at the statistics, only 1 in 4 prisoners who are released then go on and find employment. So if you keep them in employment, you will then integrate them better back into society. The other problem is that when they do come out, 46% of them go on to commit crime within a year. Those who are on shorter sentences, that jumps up to 60%. So there is a correlation between how long you spend in prison and the likelihood of you coming out and reoffending. So I want sentences to mean what they say. I don't want you to go down for 6 years and come out in 3. And I think if you go down for 6, you should serve 6 years, because in the end, we can have rehabilitation, but I think deterrents are just as important.
Are you still a believer in the death penalty?
Yes, I am. Like the majority of people in this country, I believe in the death penalty for people who go out and kill harmless children, and I make no apologies for holding that view. Can I also make one other point? The real issue that we've got with prisons here is that the budgets have been cut massively. So let me just give you this statistic. In 2000, for every 1 prison officer, there were 3 prisoners. Now, in 2015, there are 6 prisoners for every 1 prison officer. There was a 30% cut in prison officers since 2010. And my cousin's a prison officer, and he tells me all the time they've lost control. And indeed, between now and 2020, there'll be another 15% cut on the Ministry of Justice budget. We need to spend money on our prisons. We need our people to come out, educated, rehabilitated, and then integrated back into society. But you won't do that unless you spend the money.
Thank you, Paul. The man there in the striped T-shirt. Striped shirt.
Yeah, I think rehabilitation is really important, but at the same time, where does the deterrent kind of start? At the end of the day, if these people are out in, general society in the midweek, we are acting as the prison officers almost, in the fact that we are the people who are in front of these prisoners. They should be, behind bars if they've done something wrong for a set amount of time, where proper rehabilitation can take effect.
Right, so it should be done inside the prison, not outside. Paul Mason, where are you on that?
Well, I'm totally in favour of enforcing the criminal justice system fairly. And, how many constituencies are being investigated at the moment, Amber, for Conservative election fraud? Innocent, of course, until proved guilty. I think it's 29, isn't it? And you'll be the first to say, as a Conservative minister and a Privy Councillor, that if anybody were to be found to have conspired to link those constituencies together so that somebody knew the Conservative Party was overspending at local level, that person should be prosecuted,
What's
shouldn't
this
they?
got to do with Conrad's question?
To do with it?
It's to do with the fact that a lot of young working class men and some women get very criminalised by poverty and hopelessness and living a terrible life, and we should, as you say, rehabilitate them. But we should be investigating the crimes of the rich and the privileged with just the same amount of vigour. Starting with the people who keep their money in Panama.
Can I just say, people are in prison for a reason. I go to school in Walsall and we can't even afford iPads. Working class girls like me and my best friend, we can't learn off the iPads at school. We don't have access to iPads because our school just can't afford it. So why do prisoners deserve iPads, but hard-working girls like me and Ellie don't? Why?
Amber Wright.
The purpose of this reform is at the centrepiece of the Prime Minister's desire to give people life chances. And what we're doing is investing money and totally reforming the prison service and the prisons themselves. It's the biggest reform since the Victorian age, to make them fit for purpose so that we don't have the sort of numbers that Paul was quoting about recidivism, about people coming out of jail and just committing crimes. We want to make sure that people get a second chance.
You're going to give her an iPad there?
It's not just that.
Is she going to get an iPad?
Being a lawyer, how am I supposed to learn in my school if I don't have the technology to learn? We hardly have computers at work, we don't have the funding, and I think hard-working pupils deserve that funding, not prisoners who've committed a crime.
Well, I have to say, maybe your school, maybe schools now. It's a fair point. There has to be equality in this system, and the fact is that a lot of schools now provide iPads as well for their children as they go through. So I hope that the education system can help people access iPads, and if they can't get their own ones, then have good access to computers. Right. There's no question of all prisoners having iPads. Some of the elements of this have been highlighted upon as though this government is going to be soft on crime. We're not. What we're interested in is making sure that people come out educated, they can get jobs, and they can make a useful contribution and not go back to crime.
OK, brief point for you, and then I'll come to you, Tim.
I think that we have to remember that not all crimes are violent crimes. Therefore, you talk about these people being a risk to us. They're not everyone who is in prison is a risk to the outside population. And violent crimes, of course, should be treated inside. But in terms of rehabilitation and allowing people to become a functioning part of society, it simply can't be done when they're being locked away for 23 hours a day in a cell.
Tim Farron.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Conrad's point, are we being soft on crime? I don't think so. We are being very ineffective on crime, though. Let's look at what prison is for. Three things, really. It is to punish people who have done wrong, to make sure there is justice and the victim gets some reparation, essentially. Secondly, it's to protect society from those people who will be a danger to society. And thirdly, it's about rehabilitation. So those people who've been through the prison system come out improved, shall we say, and fully able to function in society. And as has already been said, just about half of the 85,000 people who are currently in prison will reoffend within 12 months. So many of them not violent crimes at all. So what do we do to make sure we make our country safer? Rehabilitation is right and just. It's morally correct to give people a second chance, but it's actually about keeping us safe. Because if people are rehabilitated, they won't offend again, and we as a country will be safer.
Last brief points from our audience. You, sir, there, quickly if you would.
I'm a serving prison officer, so I see it firsthand. I'm all for rehabilitation, but the things you're asking to rehabilitate cannot be done in custody.
Outside of custody, you mean?
They need to be done outside of custody before by the time people get into custody and they're onto the longer sentences. So you just need staff.
Should there be more community sentences?
Sorry, what do you think of the suggestions that were put forward by the government for people spending 5 days a week at home working and 2 days under your care in prison?
It will not work. Because you're not incentivising people to stay at home, you're incentivising people not to come to prison at weekends. It's a punishment system.
OK, I'll take one more point from you there, and then we must stop. Yes, sir.
Isn't this just a publicity stunt? It's one of the few occupations, as Paul said, that doesn't get filled in post. Isn't this the government looking for the general public to do their job?
All right, we'll have to leave that as a rhetorical question, I think, because she can't answer because our time's up. Have to try again later. I'm sorry. It really is. Our hour finished. Wow. Next week, we're going to be in Ipswich. Ed Miliband is going to be back on Question Time for the first time since he lost the election, or indeed since he became leader of the Labour Party. And David Davis for the Conservatives, Caroline Lucas for the Greens, and the T-shirted figure of Steve Hilton is going to be on the panel, who for... yeah, don't you? Do look surprised. Who for 7 years was, after all, David Cameron's strategy advisor. We're going to be in Cardiff the week after that, so that's an exciting programme in Ipswich and another one in Cardiff. Go to the website if you'd like to come, or call the number that's there. If you're listening on 5 Live, don't go away, because the debate goes on Question Time Extra Time. Here, my thanks to our panel, to all of you who came here to Walsall to take part. Until next Thursday, good night.
Andrew Neil with This Week, next on BBC One with Big Issue founder John Bird, Miranda Green, John Nicholson, Andrew Rawnsley and David Icke.